thought we'd start something out with a little bit of rousing song. What do you think, yeah? Every step you step is a way a new story might start. And the olden yarns woven well is the way we can all warm our hearts. So many times over time, once upon a time is the cure to whatever it is that ails. The tales that we tell help us endure. Years go by, folks grow old, but the stories that get told, may they live evermore among us. Way back ago. That's my favorite way to say once upon a time. Way back ago, back before so many things were all happening at the same time, such that multitasking was not yet a thing, so that back then there could still be just once upon a time. Back in that time, things were not as different from now as we want to believe. Back in that time when so many stories happened, things were a lot the same. There were influencers back then. They were just your evil witches. The kings and the warlocks were the ones that owned all the stocks. That ain't different from now. There were trolls back then. They were just not yet internet trolls. Back in that time, things were not as different as now. According to my reading of fairy tales, it was very easy to get yourself turned into a fish or a donkey or whatever. It just happened all the time. 1 in every 7 people end up being cursed in fairy tales, according to my reading. 1 in every 7 people, which sounds like a high number until you realize 1 in every 7 people is the same percentage of Americans that have bad credit. I'm not an economist, but I can read fairy tales. What's my point? My point is that back in that time, if a warlock cursed a rock and threw it at a prince, the prince would dodge out of the way. And everybody would be like, yay ever after. But y'all, it was only yay ever after for the prince, wasn't it? Because there was still a loaded camouflage rock full of dirty magic just waiting in the path for some poor peasant child to come walking around, thinking fantastical thoughts, kicking rocks. Next thing that child knows, pow, his head is a book. This story is called The Bookhead Boy. Now, the strangest thing was, everyone in that child's life still recognized him, even with a book for a head. He was that kid. We all know that kid. He walked past all the shops in his village and people started yelling stuff out. The blacksmith was the first one to yell it. Hey, everybody, Timothy's head's a hardback today. The haberdasher looked up, saw that book for a head and thought, here I thought I'd made a hat in every size. The monk walked past and said, well, nothing. The bookhead boy made it all the way home, where, of course, his brother and sister immediately tried to make him sleep on the bookshelf that night. His mother, against his wishes, she de-dog-eared his pages. She spit-shined his leather cover. She pulled the bookmark out of his cowlick, which was frankly not helpful, Mom. But his father never once looked up from a different book. See, that's the thing about the bookhead boy's life. A lot of people in that child's life could read, but for whatever reason, nobody took the time to read him. And that is why the boy left. The story goes that he walked for days and nights, until he came to this old stone well along the path. And this old stone well was very peculiar because there was water going across the tip top of that stone well. And this water was strange. It was undisturbable water. Do you understand that word, undisturbable? If you throw a penny in, there's no splash. If you dip a bucket in, there's no splosh. It was perfectly undisturbed. There was nothing wrong with the water itself. It was the well that had been cursed by an apprenticing witch for a final project. She got a B-. That's a different story. The point is that because that water was perfectly undisturbable, that bookhead boy could see his reflection and get to know himself page by page by page. And yes, the text was reversed in the reflection. And don't tell me we have not all felt like that about ourselves at some point. The point is, that child was able to reverse and learn every single word. And when the last page was turned, the last 3 words that were read were "to be continued." And when those words were read, that is when that book fell off that child's head and splashed into that well being cured from its curse by its own usefulness. And as that book slowly sank down into that well, that child could see his old new reflection in the rippling. And what that child saw was the reflection of someone who was excited to go find their next story. You can easily lose yourself or find what you're looking for, but a good story guides you well. There'll be all that you need there and more. Why don't y'all sing it along with me? Ready? Here we go. Years go by, folks grow old, but the stories that get told, may they live evermore among us. Thank you all so much.